Hello, Fountain Street. I wish I could look out there and see you all. I also wish I could stand behind that amazing carved bald eagle at the Fountain Street pulpit. There are certain advantages, I suppose, to delivering this sermon by videotape from our deck here in Newaygo County on the beautiful Muskegon River. Um, I feel a certain kinship to Francis of Assisi out here preaching to the birds and the animals. And who knows, maybe one of those real bald eagles will fly by. um, it does seem like a particularly appropriate place to deliver this sermon on the spirituality of water. In our family, wrote Norman MacLean, the author of A River Runs Through It, in our family there was no clear line between religion and fly fishing. And I relate. There's something about standing in a Michigan trout stream on an early June evening, cool water rushing by just above the knees of your waders, sun below the treetops casting a golden glow over the river valley, the smell of cedar, the call of a barred owl breaking the hypnotizing sound of water cascading over rock, the dimple of a brook trout rising from behind a boulder to pick a mayfly off of the surface, and a magic wand in your hand. Can I get an amen from the fly fisher people? Amen. I hear you all the way here in Newaygo County. For the rest of you, well, the next 20 minutes might be a time to plan your week or to develop your grocery list. This is a videotaping. I suppose you could just skip ahead past the sermon, which I hope you won't do. But I've always longed to deliver a sermon on the spirituality of water, and specifically the spirituality of moving water, of rivers. And you, Fountain Street, are the fortunate few who will benefit from this obsession of mine. I recall a solo hike on the Appalachian Trail in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. My hiking buddy, our son, had abandoned me to start a new life in California. And the first 2 days of the hike were appropriately cold and rainy, and my spirit reflected the gloom around me. By day 3, the sun came out, the path ahead brightened, and I began to think that maybe the world didn't end when Damien moved away. My route had taken me to a camping site by Big Creek in the eastern end of the park. And after I set up camp, I assembled my pack rod and I headed down to the river. Working my way upstream along the stony shoreline, I came to a deep pool behind a boulder the size of a Volkswagen. Carefully, I picked my way up onto that boulder and to look down into the water beyond. What I remember was the sun sparkling on the water. A little rainbow where the cascading waterfall kicked up a spray. The gin clear depths where every stone on the bottom seemed magnified, and a half a dozen trout suspended in the water column. What I recall was the rock, the sun. I don't recall whether I caught fish. I don't even really remember casting. What is clear in my memory is that the sun and the rock and the water and the trout worked a healing miracle in my lonely heart. In Hermann Hesse's great novel Siddhartha, the protagonist returns to the river. He looked lovingly into the flowing water, into the transparent green, into the crystal lines of its wonderful design. He saw bright pearls rise from its depths, bubbles swimming on the mirror, sky blue reflected in them. The river looked at him with 1,000 eyes, green, white, crystal, sky blue. How he loved this river, how it enchanted him, how grateful he was to it. In his heart, he heard the newly awakened voice speak, and it said, "Love this river, stay by it, learn from it." I'll return to Siddhartha in a bit, for this is really only the beginning of the wisdom that the river taught him. But first, we think of river in its recreational uses, certainly. Water is for swimming, for boating, for fishing, or just to lie beside on a white sand beach. Indeed, the Great Lakes states enjoy a $9 billion annual water tourism industry. Maybe not this year, but on an average year, $9 billion on water tourism. We think of water in its more utilitarian sense. We drink it. In fact, we can last no more than 100 hours without water before we collapse and die. We've seen how fragile water can be. The children of Flint will grow up with significant cognizant deficit and physical complications as the result of drinking water poisoned by lead. The people of Toledo were without municipal water for 4 days when blue-green algae clogged the city's intake from Lake Erie. Water is a mode of transportation as well. Freighters in the Great Lakes alone move 80 million tons of cargo every year. And then there's commercial fishing, whitefish, lake perch, lake trout, provide food and provide jobs. But what of the spiritual nature of water? Well, let's start with its symbolism. Water plays an important role in religious traditions. God parted the water for the Hebrew people escaping from Egypt, and he closed it back in over their assailants. Moses touched the rock with his staff in the barren, brutal, arid wilderness, and water gushed forth. Water, in both cases, was seen as a sign of the power and the providence of the Almighty, a promise kept, a hope restored. The river Styx in Greek mythology, the river Jordan in the Abrahamic traditions, the Ganges River in Hindu tradition, and the Yol River of Norse mythology, all separated the living from the dead. The life of toil and pain and suffering from the Elysian fields, from the promised land. Crossing was difficult, but the joy of eternal rest lay beyond on the other shore. Rivers as symbols. In fact, the symbolism of the Christian baptism is profound, going down into the water where the baptized die with Christ to be raised with him, cleansed and forgiven. I trust nobody literally dies when they're baptized. It's a symbolic act, and the medium is water. My Blessed Mother was a Southern Baptist from Alabama, and the experience of being fully immersed in the waters of Sipsey Swamp at her baptism stayed with her for her entire life. I was baptized at East Congregational Church as a 14-year-old, and I vividly remember the Reverend Herbert Studebaker filling his giant palm with water that ran down over my head and over my collar and changed my life. Yes, water is a symbol. But powerful as symbol is, and we all know the power of symbol, it doesn't do justice to the full meaning of water as a spiritual medium. So think of this. We came into the world from a watery nest in the womb of our mother. Water washes us into the world. Our body consists of water. In fact, 60% or more of our body, according to the biologists, is water. We come from water, we are water, and we go to water. When John of Revelation wanted to show a vision of the future life in the new heaven and the new earth, he wrote, "Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the city, of the streets of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation." And the Genesis creation story reminds us that out of chaos came water, and out of water came everything else that followed. Evolutionary biology confirms that life emerged first from water. Simple, single-cell organisms formed in the water, and then they evolved into ever more complex forms. When that biological evolution reached a certain stage, some of those complex forms came out of the water and onto land and became even more complex. At a much later stage, one of those complex land-living organisms stood up and began to use tools and developed self-awareness. But it all started in water, and the stamp of water is on us still and in us. Another hike. This one on the Pictured Rocks Trail from Munising to Grand Marais in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The day ended at Chapel Beach, a campsite on the shore of Lake Superior. I made camp, I ate my dinner, and I wandered over to the edge of a bluff looking out over the lake. The evening was coming on, and dark, rain-filled clouds rolled across the sky from the west to the east. The water was crashing on the rocks beneath me as wave upon wave washed the shoreline. I was tired, I'm certain, from a day of hiking up and down ridges and tripping over rocks and roots. It was easy as I sat there to enter a trance-like sleep, although I was still entirely present and alert to my environment. And I came to see that there was water above me, and there was water below me, and there was water within me, and that it was the same water, that I was one with the sky and the lake, a child of the universe, and I was at peace. Let's return now to Siddhartha, who, under the tutelage of the aged ferryman Vasaveda, learns another lesson from the river. He took Siddhartha's hand, led him to the seat on the riverbank, and sat down beside him and smiled at the river. "You have heard it laugh," he said, "but you have not heard everything. Let us listen. You will hear more." They listened. The many-voiced song of the river echoed softly. Siddhartha looked into the river, and he saw many pictures in the flowing water. He saw his father, lonely, mourning for his son. He saw himself, lonely, also in the bonds of longing for a faraway son. He saw his son, also lonely. The boy eagerly advancing along the burning paths of life's desire. The river's voice was sorrowful. It sang with yearning and sadness, flowing toward its goal. "Listen better," said Vasaveda. Siddhartha tried to listen better. The picture of his father, his own picture, and the picture of his son all flowed into each other. They all became part of the river. It was the goal of all of them, yearning, desiring, suffering. And the river's voice was full of longing, full of smarting woe, full of insatiable desire. The river flowed on towards its goal. Siddhartha saw the river hasten, all the waves and water hastened, suffering towards the goal. Many goals, to the waterfall, to the sea, to the current, to the ocean. And all goals were reached, and each was succeeded by another. The water changed to vapor and rose, became rain and came down again, became spring, brook, river, changed anew, flowing anew. But the yearning voice had altered. It still echoed sorrowfully, searchingly, but other voices accompanied it, voices of pleasure and sorrow, good and evil voices, laughing and lamenting voices, hundreds of voices, thousands of voices. He was now listening intently, completely absorbed, quite empty, taking in everything. He could no longer distinguish the different voices, the merry voice from the weeping voice, the childish voice from the manly voice. They all belonged to each other. The lament of those who yearn, the laughter of the wise, the cry of indignation, and the groan of the dying. They were all interwoven and interlocked, entwined in 1,000 ways, and all the voices, all the goals, all the yearnings, all the sorrows, all the pleasures, all the good and evil, all of them together was the world. All of them together was the stream of events, the music of life. And then the great song of 1,000 voices consisted of one word: Om. Perfection. Water is the spiritual element that binds us together with nature and with one another. Water is life. If we come from water and consist of water, then water is our common bond. Distinctions of race, gender, age, ability, they all vanish, submerged in the water of life. Water also binds the present to the past and the future. All the water that will ever be came into being in a cosmic event at the beginning of time. No more water has been made. Neither has any water been lost. It just changes shape. Sit beside a river and watch its flow. Our Muskegon River, where Susan and I live, today is flowing at about 2,200 cubic feet per second, and that's pretty average for this time of year. But it's been flowing since the glaciers melted, and it flowed somewhere before the glaciers. And it will flow long after I am gone, long after humans no longer inhabit the earth. Indigenous peoples think of rivers as the circulatory system of our Mother Earth. Her life juices flow and flow and flow. Sometimes they evaporate, they rise and form clouds that return refreshing water to the earth and to the rivers. Sometimes they freeze and wait for the good warmth of spring to return and free them to flow and flow and flow. The water ceremony in the Ojibwe tradition is a blessing on the waters, a purification by means of water, a recognition of our need for water and our responsibility to protect water. There are water walkers, Ojibwe women elders who walk around the Great Lakes, offering the water ceremony, blessing the waters. Only women may offer the blessing of the water ceremony. Perhaps that's because those who nurture life in the water of their bodies, who usher life into the world, are the only ones pure enough, close enough to Mother Earth to offer the blessing. So as we conclude today, when Carol Koistra and I had been planning this service, we were going to have three women from the congregation, including Carol, offer this Ojibwe water blessing. We won't be able to do that, but Susan will be reading the blessing for us now to conclude this sermon.
As I receive this water and it flows through me, medicine, dispelling all ills, may it become medicine, revealing the wisdom within and throughout. I offer apology for any harm done through wrong speech and action. As this water flows through me and becomes vapor, may it purify the atmosphere. May it nourish the wisdom potential in the people. I offer apology for any harm done through wrong speech and action. As this water flows through me and returns to the water table, may it remove the impurities of chemicals placed within the water. May the water be made new again. May this water become medicine for all beings in this and all worlds. Thank you for this gift of life. Thank you for the gift of water. We appreciate this water that you have given. Now the earth is dry and the trees are crying. Please accept our offering of this water. Please accept our apology for any harm done through wrong speech and action.